don't overwork yourself, know your limits, and really learn to delegate because you just cannot do it all. You want to create something of high quality, do not sacrifice either the quality of your materials or, the rest of your responsibilities to be able to do this.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and second language acquisition. This week on Speaking of Language,
Dr. Oya Topçuoğlu Judd of the Middle East and North African Languages program at Northwestern University expands on her recent talk about incorporating collaborative course design and contemporary media into the language classroom.
Welcome to a new episode of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelica Kramer, the director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University.
And I'm Sam Lupowitz, the LRC's media manager.
Today, Oya Topçuoğlu Judd will share her experience with collaborative curriculum design in less commonly taught languages and how to use authentic materials in a student-centered multimodal approach.
She recently gave a talk as part of our monthly LRC speaker series on this topic, which you can watch on our website.
Welcome to Speaking of Language, Oya.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And we are delighted to have you. So we are very excited to continue our conversation about collaborative curriculum design with you. But before we get started, can you please briefly introduce yourself for our listeners and share with us your background and your own path with languages?
Sure. My name is Oya Topçuoğlu Judd. I am an associate professor of instruction in Turkish at Northwestern University, and I'm also the director of the Turkish program at Northwestern. My background, interestingly, is not in languages. I was trained as an archaeologist and art historian of the ancient Middle East.
Ooh, cool.
Very cool.
And it makes great cocktail conversation. It's fun. But I came into languages and language instruction in grad school. When I was doing my PhD at the University of Chicago. And I started out as a TA in Turkish because they were looking for a native speaker of Turkish to TA the language class. And then I must have done a really fantastic job.
Clearly.
Then the next year, they gave me my own standalone class for
nice.
the intermediate level. And right around then, I discovered the existence of the Chicago Language Center and the existence of the inimitable Kathy Bauman.
Yep.
And it all took off from there. And I started, doing these workshops and things with them and really learning the ins and outs and all the tricks of language pedagogy.
Yeah.
I learned 7 languages.
Oh, wow.
Myself, starting when I was 11. My first foreign language actually is Italian.
Oh, nice.
I went to an Italian Catholic school in Turkey, of all places, and the entire curriculum was in Italian.
Oh, that's wild.
So English is my second foreign language. I learned Latin also in high school. And then in college, I learned a little bit of French and German because I knew that I was going to need them as research languages in grad school. Yeah. And then in grad school, I couldn't stop. And once you get that bug in you, you just can't stop.
Yeah.
And in grad school, I learned Akkadian and Hittite, two ancient dead languages of the area that I study as an archaeologist. So I did understand what it was like to learn languages. And I had a pretty good idea of what makes a good language teacher for having been on the other end, the receiving end of things for so long. But yeah, so that's how I ended up getting into this. And I taught both at Chicago and then at Northwestern. This is going to be my 11th year at Northwestern, actually.
Okay. Yeah. So actually, before we start talking about your talk, what does make a good language teacher?
Oh, that's a good question. Somebody who is approachable, I think, is very important. And I was lucky enough to always have those people in front of me teaching me languages. And except for my first year Italian teacher when I was 11.
Oh, no.
Oh, she was scary. She was a scary, scary nun who whipped us all in place.
I know. I was gonna say even as a Jewish boy, like I feel like the tales of Catholic school nuns are so so present in culture that as soon as you started saying that, I said, "Oh, I know what this is gonna be." Yeah.
Look, her name was Sir Salvatorina. And she taught us Italian like 30 hours a week for the first year of middle school. I was 11 years old. I went to visit the school because I was taking a friend around the city. I went to visit the school about 10 years ago. So, like, I don't know, I was in my 30s. And she was still there.
Oh, wow.
And I had not spoken Italian for at least a decade. And, the English became my first language at this point. I saw her. I sat down in front of her, and it all came back, and Italian just started flowing out of my mouth. But it was just the fear that made that happen. But, Anyway, what makes a good language teacher? Somebody who knows really how to build a rapport with their students. I think that's the most important thing.
Yep.
And, you don't necessarily have to be a native speaker of the language, but you should have a good command of the culture that's behind that language. I think that's really important. Yeah.
Great.
Well, so moving on to your talk, you discussed some of the challenges less commonly taught language instructors face, especially related to teaching materials and language learning practices and methodology. Can you unpack some of that for our listeners?
Absolutely, yes. So my experience is obviously in this case limited to Turkish, but talking to other colleagues who also teach Lictals, I think this is a common problem for everybody. It's just the quality of the textbooks. It always just makes me feel terrible when I see German textbooks or Spanish textbooks, all colorful and updated, and they have these additional audios and videos attached to them, all of that. We don't have any of those things. There is, for instance, for Turkish, there is no, let alone perfect, there is no good textbook out there. So I work across 5 different textbooks.
Huh. Wow.
My students have one textbook that's written for learners of Turkish in the U.S. The remaining ones are not, actually. That's also another problem because those are designed for Turkish learners in Turkey.
Yep.
So the context is different. The things that they're learning is different. The approach is different. And the book that we use mostly is pretty dry. I mean, it's excellent in terms of teaching grammar, but not really for anything else.
Right.
So I really have to do the work of bringing in more material. And at the very beginning, I was really relying on these additional things that are out there because they're out there, right? Like you come through 5 other books and then you just pick bits and pieces. But as I started learning more and more about curriculum design and what makes good teaching materials, mostly through my training at the University of Chicago, I also came to just looking down on those materials a little bit and being like, look, this is kind of okay, but it doesn't really hit all the points that I want. So I started creating my own. And I know that pretty much all of my colleagues across the U.S. and North America, I believe there's 32 or 33 active Turkish language programs in North America.
Okay.
And I know for a fact that everybody does the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's unfortunately just the nature, especially with less and least commonly taught languages. So you are very effectively collaborating with colleagues across languages and even across institutions. What steps have you taken at Northwestern to enhance language learning and cultural competence, especially in your Turkish language program? Can you talk a little bit more about that? Sure,
yeah. So this collaboration thing is really key for small language programs like us. And, we call it the Turkish program at Northwestern, but it's just me. And it's pretty much the same thing everywhere for Turkish and for the other less commonly taught languages as well. So we are just like a one-person show, right? So there's no way that we can do everything from teaching to designing materials to doing cultural events and this and that all on our own. So really collaboration becomes vital. And when you say collaboration, people always think, oh, I need to collaborate with someone who does the same thing as I do. But then like you're a single instructor program, like how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
So you start reaching out to colleagues who do the same language at other institutions, which is what I've been doing here with our colleague here with Banu Özer Griffin. And yeah, that's great. We both teach Turkish. We understand each other.
Yep.
Fantastic. But that's still quite difficult because I'll give you an example. Cornell is on a semester system.
Right.
You guys do 15 weeks. And we are on the quarter system. We do 3 10-week quarters.
Yeah.
So Banu and I could never align our curricula and the way we teach and basically do something together. But what do? Then you turn to your colleagues that you see every day at your own institution. And this is what we did, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that project. So it was in our program, the Middle East and North African languages program at Northwestern. We currently teach 3 languages, Turkish, Arabic, and Hebrew. So the 3 of us, one instructor from Arabic and one from Hebrew, they're not single instructor programs, and me, we came together and we designed 3 sister courses. And I call them sister courses because they are based on the same pedagogical framework, same topic, so same theme, I should say, the theme of cities. And, you know, the tasks are similar, but the content is obviously different because we're covering 3 different cities. But this was an incredibly enriching experience for all of us. And again, it was not the kind of class that either, like any one of us could have created on our own without each other's help. But, you know, 3 entirely different languages, and it worked beautifully.
In your talk, you went into great detail about your course of those sister courses concerning Istanbul. Could you tell us a little bit about what that course looked like? How did the students engage with the material? How did it go? What can you share with us about it?
Sure, yeah. I have to say I'm very proud of that course, not because the course itself is great, but also I am a very proud Istanbulite myself. I was born and raised in the city, and I mostly because of my interest in history and archaeology, but also my family's interest in these things, I've traveled around the city a lot since I was a little kid, so I actually do know the city pretty well, and I know its history pretty well. So all of those things I was able to reflect in that course, which made me very happy. But so here's the thing. The 3 sister courses, they are Istanbul, Cairo, and Jerusalem in the respective languages. What we ended up doing with these is we really started with the same layout for all 3 of the courses. So we and this was not a content that we had ever covered in our classes before. So we really needed to familiarize our students with the concept of city in the target language. Yeah. So we laid out the very beginning of the what we call the course pack, I guess. The first chapter, chapter 0, is talking about the city. So that's where we started with, you know, vocabulary about a city. You know, what parts of a city are there? And we introduced a little bit of the city of Evanston, where Northwestern is located, because students are very familiar with it, right? Of course. So, you know, we set up some little tasks. How do you go from your dorm to this cafe and this and that? To just really get them to warm up to this concept of constantly talking about the city as an entity. Yeah. And then all of our courses basically start with a chapter on the history of the cities. And again, Istanbul, Jerusalem, Cairo, 3 cities with immense histories that go far back. So we really tried to balance that a little bit. And, you don't want to turn this into a history lesson.
Sure.
But so, the first chapter is the history of the city. And then the next chapter is monuments. So the famous things, the tourist sites, what do you think of when you think of Istanbul? Oh, the Hagia Sophia and the Topkapı Palace, right? So a little bit of that. And that's where we actually stopped really overlapping content across 3 courses, and then everybody just went off to do something for the next 2 chapters that they thought was important. So my next chapter is Istanbul in literature. What we end up doing in there is the students read a short story by one of the very, very famous Turkish authors, Aziz Nesin. It's a short story, the gist of which is what it means to be an Istanbulite. It's a really funny little story, and it's this guy at the beginning who introduces himself as just really being from the city and having his family of 7 generations being from the city. I know the city like the back of my hand. I couldn't live anywhere else, blah, blah, blah. Then he ends up accompanying a British couple from London, friends of friends, who visit Istanbul, and he's their guide. And across the several days that they go around the city together, it turns out that this guy actually doesn't know anything about the city that he's so proud of being from. And because he's just lived there and he just goes from his house to his work and then comes back and that's it. So the concept of what does it mean to be from a place, right? So that's something that we studied through that story with the students, and it was really interesting because that's where they can really draw from their own personal experiences. The first year I taught this, I had a student who was born and raised in New York City. Very, very proud New Yorker.
I bet.
So he had some really strong opinions about what it means to be from New York. But then there are kids from small towns who are like, yeah, whatever, my small town is really boring. I don't really feel, being from whatever town as part of my identity, right? So this was very rich discussion.
Sure.
And the last chapter of my course is what it really feels like to live in Istanbul today. We've done all of these fun parts. We've looked at the touristy sites, the history. It's all great. But what does it feel like to just live there day in, day out? Is it as glamorous as it looks or whatever? So we, look at transportation. How do you get around the city?
Right.
And I think it's really important because it really tells you what it really takes to go from your house to your job, to your work, for instance, but also really helps students because they now have knowledge of how to get around that city when they show up there, for instance, for study abroad.
Sure.
Right? And then, we talk about neighborhoods. Istanbul is a big city of 15 million people. And I think it's 200 kilometers from one end to the other.
Wow.
It's enormous.
Goodness.
And different parts of the city have very different, distinct characters, right? What kind of neighborhood is this? Who lives where? So we look at those things. And my favorite part at the very end is we watch these 3 interviews done by an online journalism website in Turkey with 3 different people who live in Istanbul. Funny enough, none of them are actually from Istanbul. They've all immigrated. They're first generation Istanbulites, whatever. But it's a white collar tech worker, and a blue collar auto technician, and a university student. They all live in different parts of the city.
Yeah.
And they've lived in the city different amounts of time. One of them has been there, for 30 years. Another one has been there for 2 years. And so they talk about their experiences. And it's very interesting because their experiences are very common. They're all, complaining about traffic, how difficult it is to go from one end of the city to the other, how expensive everything is. So, you have to be very careful about where you go out at night and, what they have time to do throughout their week and how they engage with the city. So it's extremely real. And I think it's a very, very good resource for the students to really understand what people who live there all the time feel than just like, watching a film or like reading something touristy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what I really love about this concept of cities is that it's so applicable to any other language class, to any other area, right? I mean, as you're talking about the different neighborhoods, I'm just thinking, think of Berlin.
Exactly.
This is exactly the same thing. I mean, goodness, even in Ithaca, we have different neighborhoods.
It's true.
So this course was aimed at intermediate mid-level learners, but you also talked about your first-year course in elementary Turkish, where you use TV shows. Can you talk a little bit more about that, how you integrated TV shows?
Sure. Yeah. So that's a newer course. The Istanbul course I already taught twice. So, I've made some adjustments. I have like better data and feedback from the students. But the elementary level course is a new one. I taught it for the first time this past academic year. And the reason why we redid our first-year curriculum mostly is because, unfortunately, we were losing students. It was becoming difficult to get students to get into the program. So I decided at this point, I really need to change things up. I can't just like do cultural events. I need to do something with this class. I need to do something attractive. I need to do something sexy with this class. And the easiest thing to do, honestly, now for a Turkish class is to incorporate TV shows. Turkish television has been having a boom in the last 10-ish years, I would say. And I did not know this. I was blown away when I looked this up. But Turkey is second only to the U.S. in terms of TV exports in the world.
That's crazy.
150 plus countries air Turkish TV shows on their national TV all the time.
Yeah.
And it's everywhere, from Russia to Korea to Latin America to the Middle East, even, Europe.
Yeah.
And so I knew that, one, watching TV to prepare for class is an awesome way of doing homework, so the students will be hooked on that. But then the other thing is, I know that a lot of them are already familiar with this because it's either them that they got hooked on something, or their moms and grandmas are obsessed with Turkish TV.
That's sweet.
And it actually turned out to be that way because the first quarter we did this, I all of a sudden had 6 students sitting in my classroom who had seen the flyers that we put out, and they came there I'm from Bangladesh. My mom is obsessed with this show XYZ. And I never understood what that was. Another kid was I'm from Peru. My mom and grandma spend 7 hours a day just watching Turkish TV shows with subtitles. And my favorite show is this. I'd never even heard of that show. So it was clearly the right decision to make.
Yep.
Yeah. And do you want me to talk about how we actually did this in a classroom?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So using TV, film, and, TV shows is really not a very innovative idea at this point. People have been doing this forever.
Yeah.
And but what people have been doing is to basically use clips or, some sections of a film or a TV show for a very specific purpose.
Yeah.
Let's just say, you're an elementary level, whatever language. You're teaching people how to greet one another in the formal and informal ways. And then there's something, in a movie where people introduce, each other. That's the clip that you show them and whatever. You're done, right? It's a very specific purpose. Yep. It also takes an enormous amount of time sourcing that material because, what do? You sit in front of a film with, pen and paper and you write, minute 1 second 26 to 47. They are shaking hands. Yep. It's insane. So what we're doing differently now is the students are required to watch an entire episode every week, and we actually finish the whole show in 1 quarter.
Nice.
So they really get into the spirit of the show.
Yeah.
They get to learn the characters, and they have the whole storyline. So I don't really need to introduce anything new constantly when I do this. And it really helps. And we ended up choosing, just for this reason, we ended up going with 2 Netflix shows that were Netflix Turkey productions from the last 3-4 years, actually. They're very, very recent. And they're limited season shows. Sure. One of them is 8 episodes. The other one's 10 episodes.
Perfect.
My quarter is 10 weeks. It's perfection. It works so well.
It's meant to be.
And the other thing is, there are obviously Turkish shows out there. I mean, Turkish TV in Turkey is also huge. There is just a million TV shows. But here's the problem. They're very long seasons. They're like 22, 23, 25 episodes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And each episode is about 2.5 hours.
Okay.
There is no way this could become course material.
Of course.
So that's why we're limited to the Netflix shows. But they've just worked really beautifully.
That's awesome. I want to take that class.
I know, me too. And actually, one of my favorite moments from your talk when you were showing the material for this course is how you rewrote one of your textbook exercises, which is, I mean, anyone who's ever taken any entry-level language course remembers those exercises. With all of a sudden you're introduced to 2 random characters you never met before, and you have to engage with the dialogue, about how one is tall and the other is short, and or whatever, and how you then reworked that same exercise to be about the characters from the show, and how much more engaging that must have been for the students, because these are people who they have some sort of relationship to now.
Yeah, exactly. So that sense of continuity is really something that we wanted to create in the students, because it gets them much more invested in the material. And I'm not just, talking about watching an episode every week. Like they do get invested in the characters and in the storylines. Right. And you're absolutely right that just every unit in the textbook, there's like some other random person, Mr. Blah and Mrs. Something, exactly. But then they never come back.
Nope. Right.
One of my dreams, and I know that there are several books out there, several languages actually, where there are textbooks like this, is to really write a textbook around one storyline with the same characters that continues to develop across different chapters, right? I think it's a fantastic idea. I do not have the time or the resources to do that. But that's, I think, what we sort of achieved with the TV show, because there's a continuous story.
Absolutely.
And Sam, in reference to the exercise that you were talking about, I'll talk a little bit more on that.
Please.
So we obviously did create new material based on the show. There was some vocabulary exercises, for instance, with fill in the blanks. Here's a list of words. Just put them in these blanks in these sentences. But what we did with the sentences, for instance, is to really bring in the names of the characters from the show and information about them. So again, it's not a random person, but there's continuity. But we also, in addition to doing brand new material, we also adapted some of the pre-existing material. And the example that I showed in my talk was this listening exercise. This is also a disadvantage of using 5 different textbooks, because there is just completely random things that come up for the students. And it's this one page from one of the textbooks. It's 2 friends. The topic is talking about personality. So they're learning personality adjectives, right? And the exercises, there's these two best friends, 2 young women, and they, in the recording, one of them describes herself and the friend saying, well, I'm very outgoing, but my friend is a little shy. I like to party, but she's more introverted, whatever, blah. And there's a photo on that page of 2 completely random women. What we ended up doing is we replaced that photo with photos of 2 main characters from the show. And then we wrote a new paragraph introducing these characters and recorded it in the exact same way as the original recording had done.
Smart.
So it was a lot of effort.
Sure.
But it really did ensure a huge level of continuity because the next day we could just come and talk about it with all that vocab that the students had learned, but we're still talking about last week's episode.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of all that shared effort, collaboration is a big hallmark of your work. What are some do's and maybe some don'ts for making collaboration work?
Oh, good question. Do's, definitely pick a partner who is as invested as you are in this so that you don't end up doing the work yourself. Another thing that I found very, very important in my work is to really work with someone who has the same language pedagogy foundation that you do. Because if you're trying to collaborate with a colleague who's been teaching language in the same way for the last 30 years, and now you're trying to do something cutting edge, you're not going to align in the ways that you want. Another thing that I found very enriching, do collaborate with colleagues in other languages. Because you get to learn so much. You really get to learn so much. And the thing is, the ideas that people come up with are just fantastic. We spent an entire summer 2020 actually, 3 months doing Zoom meetings with my city courses colleagues and our program director who really helped us put everything together and in shape. We spent an entire summer with, I think, weekly or maybe twice weekly Zoom meetings where we just exchanged ideas. And it was just really what made these classes work. Don'ts of collaboration. Be ambitious if you have good, innovative ideas. And I think that's what we managed to do. But also, since I'm really speaking about small programs, single instructor programs, LICTLs, don't overwork yourself. Know your limits and really learn to delegate.
Yes.
Because you just cannot do it all.
No.
You want to create something of high quality. Do not sacrifice either the quality of your materials or, the rest of your responsibilities to be able to do this. So it takes a little bit of planning. And I was lucky enough that I did have the time, but also for the elementary Turkish through TV shows course, I have worked very, very closely with my Fulbright language teaching assistant last year. And that worked beautifully because once we came to an understanding of what we were going to do, I really just delegated the majority of the responsibility to her.
Right.
And it worked beautifully. I could not have done it otherwise teaching full time.
Oh, of course. Yeah. No, it's amazing the work that you have put into both of these courses and the end results, and also just thinking of the student feedback. I mean, it's, impressive work.
Thank you. Just one little thing. I really wish that LICTL instructors at universities had the opportunity or were given the opportunity of either taking a quarter off or taking a reduced teaching load to sit together and do curriculum development like this. It would just be such a blessing for everybody to be able to take that time off, and then you are set for the next 3, 4, 5 years because you have amazing courses.
Absolutely.
And it benefits everybody at the university. I really wish we could do that.
I can't agree more. All the administrators out there, please take note. So for anyone who wants to learn more about the city's course and the shared approach to curriculum development with Oya's Arabic and Hebrew colleagues, I will shamelessly plug your book chapter, Oya, that recently appeared in my edited volume, which is titled Sharing Less Commonly Taught Languages in Higher Education, Collaboration and Innovation. You can access that book open source on Routledge's website, so make sure you avail yourself of that opportunity.
We're so grateful that you guys made that open source. I mean, the open access. Yeah. It's just, it reaches such a wider audience that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's what's needed, right?
Absolutely.
For anyone to see and read more about this wonderful work that the people are doing.
We're doing all this work, but the whole point of this is to be able to share this with colleagues. Not everybody needs to reinvent the wheel on their own, and not everybody has the time to do that. Exactly. So, I mean, yes, I understand. We put in so much time and effort, and we're proud of what we create, and it's proprietary material, yes, but there is no point in just sitting on it and just secretively doing things and just being gatekeepers like this. Absolutely. We should just go out there and share it and see how many more awesome things people can actually create based on this.
Absolutely. So other than this chapter, where can our listeners learn more about you and your work in general?
They can definitely go to my faculty website at Northwestern MENA Languages Program. And you can also find some of my work on academia.edu.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, Oya, it has been wonderful to talk to you about this. We're so happy that you could join us. Before we sign off, we'd like to ask you to share a word in a language you speak, love, are learning, want to learn, that feels good to say. What's that word?
The word I'm going to pick is Turkish, and it's arkadaş. Arkadaş means friend. And I'll tell you why I like this word. Turkish is an agglutinative language, which means we have word roots and then we have these extremely productive suffixes that we attach to roots to just make new words. And arkadaş is one of those. Arka means back, as in, your back. And daş is a suffix that indicates commonality, having something in common, sharing something. So arkadaş literally means someone who has your back.
Yeah. That's cool.
I love
that. Giving me the chills.
Great.
That is wonderful. Well, Oya, thank you for sharing all of your thoughts, all of your experiences, all of the work that you have been doing. We can't wait to see what new courses you will develop in all your free time. And thank you also so much for speaking of language with us today.
Thank you both for inviting me. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Join us next week to hear about how some of our colleagues use ChatGPT for creating and utilizing bots in language classes. Until then,
auf Wiederhören.
The Language Resource Center is located on the ground floor of Stimson Hall on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. Check us out on the web at lrc.cornell.edu.
And follow Cornell LRC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Speaking of Language is produced by Angelika Kramer and Sam Lupowitz.
Recorded by Sam Lupowitz.
Original music by Sam Lupowitz, Dan Gable, and Joe Gibson.
Thanks also to the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University.
As a reminder, the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Sciences or any other official entity of Cornell University.
We thank our listeners, and do stay tuned for our next episode.